Welcome to the Queer Spirit Podcast. I'm your host, Nick Venegoni. Here we have conversations with artists, healers, and activists who enliven the LGBTQ communities and who empower our queer spirits to flourish. Before we get started with the interview, if you haven't heard, I've started a Patreon account for the podcast. Patreon is a way for you to help support the show and get special rewards in return, such as a thank you shout out on the show and an enamel button with the Queer Spirit logo. This year, I've also added access to videos of the podcast interviews and a free monthly live virtual sound bath. Today, I'd like to offer a shout out of gratitude to our most recent Patreon donors. We have Bill, Isabel, and Kathy. Thank you so much for supporting the show and helping us to bring queer spirit to folks everywhere. If you'd like to join in supporting the show, just go to patreon.com/queer spirit. You can also find the link in the show notes. Any Patreon funds remaining after the basic production costs will be donated to nonprofits supporting diverse queer communities. Once again, that link is patreon.com/queer spirit. Thanks for your consideration. My guest today is Kendrick Daye. Kendrick is a multimedia collage artist and the creator of the Black Queer Tarot. Originally from Coconut Grove, Florida, he is now setting up art camp in Harlem, New York. His diverse approaches to making art include art direction, bespoke design, music, and most notably collage, both digital and analog. Kendrick aims to create work that imagines a future where Black queer life is prosperous and thriving. Today, Kendrick shares about how he started making art and dove in deeply, creating a zine while in college. We talk about his new Black Queer Tarot deck co-created with Justin Henry. They were motivated to create the deck that didn't exist, which depicts Black queer bodies and stories in the world of Tarot. Find him online at kendrickdaye.com. That's KENDRICKDAYE.com. And find the deck at blackqueertarot.com. Hi, Kendrick. Welcome to the show.
Hi, how are you?
I'm great. I'm really excited to have you here because I've been watching your progress with your project and your art, and I'm really excited that it's coming out and you're going to share your new tarot deck with the world. But before we get started, I wondered if you can share with us a little bit about how you first started making art and collage.
First, I'm Kendrick Daye. I am originally from Miami, Florida, and I live now in Harlem, New York. It actually is now coming upon 8 years of me being here, which is a long time. So I was always like a creative kid, and always like when I was even just like a child, like I would draw my own comic books, and like if my mom got me a toy that I didn't necessarily like, I would like add things to it to make it the toy that I wanted it to be. So I always was a creative kid. My mom made sure to like put me in magnet school. So I was always in magnet school for middle and high school. And middle was just an art school. And in high school, it was like a design focused school. And I went to college just as one, my mom wanted me to go to college. I just wanted to move to New York. That's all I knew I wanted to do. She was not allowing that. So we compromised on me going to college. And far enough but close enough was Atlanta. So I went to Morehouse and I studied English there. And then, but a year into school, I had started an art magazine. So I was doing a lot of photography and I was doing a lot of editorials. And we did one issue that was like a pop art themed issue. And I collaged on that. Some were digital, some were like by hand. And I just thought, this is kind of cool. And then I just got a bunch of materials and I just started like making work. And then maybe like 6 months after that, I planned my first show. And then I never looked back. And I've just been pushing, I guess, the idea of what collage can be since then.
Cool. And so have you mostly been using photo and collage in most of your art in the last 10 years or so?
I mean, yeah. And the thing is, I've dabbled in other things. Like I've done like music and I've done video too, video editing. But even I think the way I do those things, it still feels like a collage because I'm still pulling a lot of pieces together. So it still feels like a video collage or like a musical collage, and that's it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, I can understand because I've actually been dabbling and playing with music production lately too. And a lot of it is you're just sort of like have these clips of sound and stuff like that, and you're kind of moving them around, and it is kind of like a collage in that way. So with lots of
Yeah.
different layers and textures and that kind of thing. And you're also a photographer yourself, so a lot of the images you use are images you've taken. Is that correct?
Yeah, so like a lot of times, I mean, sometimes it's just I like to use, especially if I'm just doing work, like getting work out there, just like for fun and just for me or whatever. I'll use whatever. I have my favorite go-to magazines for specific things, but like for specific projects, I definitely am like intentional about photographing the subjects too. Like the tarot deck, when I did the Black Queer Tarot deck, I started before I even did the artwork. I started with just photographing people. And because I knew for something like that, I couldn't use images that were pre-existing because I needed very specific looks and poses and feelings that were going to like make the meanings of the cards shine through, you know?
Yeah. So I've watched some of your videos on your website about your production process of the deck. And it looks like you did a lot of it in your home studio. And also you were doing this in the middle of quarantine, a pandemic.
Yes.
And it looks like, were you having people on video on their phone or their computer and you were taking photos of the screen? Is that what I saw happening?
So I did photograph the bulk of people that I use for the deck. I did photograph them here in my studio. And you mentioned like that was during quarantine. It was at an interesting time where it was kind of like, you know, last summer was very like, it was full la la very free, you know? So it was kind of like, that's when I started doing it. And the tail end of it started to get a little, I guess, scary. I was definitely taking precautions before, like I scheduled them in 30-minute intervals. And I had time in between to like disinfect and everything. So it was like a task. But towards the end, there are certain people that, because of health concerns, I couldn't physically photograph them. And then some people weren't in New York at the time. There's at least 4 or 5 of them, and I really, really wanted to shoot them. So it became a process of figuring out how to do it. Eventually, what we landed on was we did the recording like we're doing now, and then I screenshot it. I just need to make sure they had the right lighting. And yeah, so that was the solution we came up with, basically.
Yeah, yeah. I just saw that and I thought that was really interesting and was just impressed by how dedicated you were to the work to really like get the image and get the models that you wanted in that way.
Yeah, no, I for better or worse, when I get an idea in my head, it's happening. Yeah.
So what inspired you to create the Black Queer Tarot in the first place?
I was looking initially for a deck to buy for myself. And the ones that I saw were like, I definitely wouldn't want to reflect me, you know, because would have been my first deck. And I wanted one that reflected me. Most people have a bunch of different decks anyway. I'm a lover of art. So now I have quite a few different ones, but I just wanted something that I knew what I was looking for. And what I was looking for was not out there, basically. Because if there were Black themed decks, they were cisgender, and just very like heterosexual. And if there were like queer decks, they were mostly white. So it was not really anything that I was looking for that was in the balance in between. So I used to joke and say that I would do it because a lot of my work already kind of looks celestial and like looks very ethereal. And a lot of them looks like I have so many, like one of my favorite cards in the deck is the Lover's card in general in any tarot deck. But I have so many, like, and I was very adamant about like, oh, this one has to be like, whatever I do for this one has to be like stellar. But even if I didn't do that, I have so many pieces that could just be popped in that look like the Lovers. So it's like a lot of my work already kind of felt like that. So I always joked about that I would do it. And then over the summer, I did an astrology series. So I did collages that were based on like the 12 signs. And I was like, oh, this could kind of work. And then once the gears started turning in my head and I was like, oh, it's an idea. And I started being, oh, this can happen. I started researching. I was like, oh, this can be a thing. But yeah, the idea came from the lack of, basically.
And so you said that you were looking for your first deck. So you never even had your own deck before you decided to do this project.
Yeah, no. I ended up getting a bunch of, like, I have quite a few like Oracle decks. Like I have like other like tarot decks, but like I didn't have one at all, like my own. So I had, up until that, I don't do readings. I mean, I do them now for myself, like little cutesy things, but I would never consider myself a reader. Like I would never take that, say I have that title or anything like that. But like I would get a lot of readings done. That's actually how I became interested in all of this. when I got my first reading. But yeah, I didn't have one. But it became this thing where it's like, I did a lot of research though beforehand. Like I bought this book, but like I read this top to bottom and like, because I wanted to know what was done art wise in tarot decks across like time. Like this has just like contemporary decks, older decks, like the first deck ever. But yeah, so I did a lot of research, but I didn't have my own deck until now. I have a bunch of different versions of the Black Queer Tarot deck and other decks laying around too.
So for those who can't see that book, I think I've seen it before. I think it's a book that has like one card from different decks like throughout time and that kind of thing. So you see a variety of different styles and...
It's called Tarot. It's a Taschen book. It's beautifully made. But yeah, it goes through the major arcana and it talks about each card and it uses examples from like so many different decks. It's just to be able to see all of these styles just really gave me like, I guess it showed me that I can do it because I was a little nervous because it's like I'm stepping into a new world. So I never wanted to feel like, you don't know what you're talking about or that kind of thing. But seeing this gave me like the freedom to be like, yeah, you can take up space in this world. And also like it's necessary. And there have been so many different interpretations of the tarot across time. So it's like, yeah, it's okay to add to it, you know?
Yeah, yeah. And you had a collaborator working on this with you.
Yes, my friend Justin, they actually gave me my first reading ever in life. And I had already got through the major arcana on the 22, because again, I had been reading this book. So like those I knew kind of like off the back of my head. And the thing about those were like, they all are very like, even if you don't know tarot, you've seen those and they're pretty like standard concepts, a lot of them. Like the Lovers, the Magician. And I had like, based on the meanings that I had kind of like already read, I had an idea of those. So those were already maybe like 80% done. And then Justin came in and when I shared the images, they were like, oh my gosh, I want to be a part of this. And I was like, okay, well, I need the guidebook anyway, and we need that written. So they came in and were able to do that, but they also helped, especially with the suit cards, be able to add context to the cards, to the artwork, which was very helpful because it became like, at first it was like a little difficult because it was like, you know, like this was my baby at first. And now it's like, now I got to take it to the babysitter. And it was like, I was nervous. But once we got through the first suit, it was like a very well-oiled machine because they would tell me, oh, this should feel like this, or this should feel like that. And then once I had the words, like, because they wrote meanings for each thing, it was so easy to just get visuals, because that's how I get a lot of concepts for artwork anyway, where it's like someone will say something in a way, or like I'll overhear a conversation, I'll hear a line in music that sounds visual, and then I turn that into visual. That's literally what I do art-wise. And so, yeah, it became like a very good, easy process to be able to get it done like that.
So whether or not we're talking about your tarot or just any of your other art, I'm curious if you've had other artists or just other things in life that have been inspirational to you for your art and your creativity.
Yeah, I mean, yeah. Like I'm a romantic, and I am very inspired by everything. And I know it sounds very cliche, but like literally, like again, like I'll be walking and I'll hear the way someone says something in a conversation, or I'll overhear like a joke, and like anything that kind of sparks something. A lot of times it comes from music, and there are artists in general that I adore, and like I feel like I've taken little pieces of their style to add to the stew that is my work. Like I love Basquiat. Like my crown in my logo is a homage to him.
I was going to say that sort of looked like that to me. I was going to ask you that. Yeah.
Yeah. I added the wings as like a homage to him. But yeah, like I Basquiat, Haring. I love Warhol. I love Picasso. I'm really obsessed with I love Frida Kahlo. I'm also really obsessed with frescoes and Renaissance paintings and even like religious paintings and like very, very I'm obsessed with how beautiful they look. And on that flip side, I also like esoteric and like dark art and like occult art. I like the way a lot of the imagery, because I clearly love symbolism and stuff like that. So yeah, I'm constantly receiving things that are like, I have a note in my phone where it's like titles, things for titles, like ideas for titles, like lyrics, any type of thing. And I have them sectioned out because I'm constantly responding to the world that's being the stimuli that's being given to me and from every avenue, you know?
Yeah. I also wanted to ask you, I saw on your website that you have a statement that says you believe in a world that centers Black queer people, a vibrant world where liberation and freedom are well-connected bedfellows. I love that part. a world where Black queer people are not just living, we're thriving. And, to me, I hear that's sort of like a queer manifesto for Afrofuturism. And I'm wondering, like, if you've thought about it in that way or, what inspired you to come up with that?
Yeah, no, absolutely. Like, I'm also very inspired by Afrofuturism as a concept. I love Octavia Butler. As a kid in general, and as an adult, a lot of the content I consume in media it's either superheroes, magic, anything with magic, witches, anything with science fiction and horror. So like that's my world, I feel like. Yeah, so it's like to me, it's like that concept is literally, you hit it on the head. That's literally the idea of it, where it's like, to me, it's twofold. And I think that's the thing about Afrofuturism, because it's like it uses these like fantastical things to talk about things that are happening today, I think. So looking forward while looking back, but still imagining, like I want to see a world where my people are thriving. Even I like projects like this it's a labor of love to get stuff out there like that. Because again, this is just one little world that like doesn't have that much representation for people like me. Imagine everything else where it's like music, movies. It's just like we're still kind of like catching up slowly but surely. But like it is work to do in every avenue, I think. So yeah, like the concept of Afrofuturism and like seeing Black queer people thrive is like they go hand in hand, I feel like.
Yeah, and I really do see all that in your work. You use the word celestial, and I do see that a lot. You use a lot of imagery of space and planets and stars, and I wouldn't really call it sci-fi-ish because I don't really see a lot of like technological kind of imagery in your work per se, but there is definitely this kind of mystical, showing an image of the future or what the present could be like even. And the way you also bring in a lot of, Black queer icons from the past and how you bring that imagery into your work too. It's really beautiful.
Thank you. Yeah, like it's a similar concept of the old and the new. I feel like though, like separately, the images are just images, I think, and they have their own context. But then, like together, it's like it adds this other layer of meaning, and like now it's this different thing. Like, and even that, the idea of that, like I always say, art is alchemy. Like that kind of like concept is still very like esoteric in its own like.
Yeah. I'm curious to know if you're open to share if you were raised in any particular spiritual tradition and if that may have influenced any aspect of this project for you, or if maybe, for a lot of queer people, we grow up in a community or a family where the spiritual community that we're part of doesn't really accept us. And so we then go and find a new spiritual path or community. And I'm wondering what that experience has been for you and if that had any influence on this deck project too.
My journey to spirituality has been interesting. You mentioned like we, in general, queer people grow up and it's like we are, depending on how religious your family is, it's always a little awkward at the least, at the best, it's always awkward. But my growing up, we were Baptist, we were raised Baptist. We didn't go to church that often. We went on like holidays and like we went for like vacation Bible in the summer, Bible camp in the summer, but we never were really like, we weren't those preacher kids where we were in church every day. So it's like, it was still very free in that sense until I came out. And then it became this like, oh, now my mom wants to talk about the Bible. Like when we had that we had like a rough patch before we started to understand each other, I think. Or she started to understand me because I was clear, I think. Because of stuff like that, I was and I grew up in the South. So it's like also like that type of stuff. It was just a lot. I was very reluctant to the idea of religion in general. I, at one point, considered myself atheist, and then I became agnostic. And now I've gotten to the point where I know because in doing that, they make it feel like religion and spirituality is not for queer people. And the irony is it is. So I had to come to my own journey of what spirituality looks like to me. And now I can confidently say I'm a spiritual person and I have my own different practices and different things that have nothing to do with the Bible or religion or any like organized religion in that sense. Yeah, I'm still a little cynical about the idea of religion in general, but like I've gotten to the point where I can say I'm spiritual, which is like informed this project because again, like I had to think about it like even just doing art, that's a spiritual practice, and that's a meditation in its own right. So it's like putting the work into this project and letting other people like me know that, hey, like this is something for us. I think my journey through all of that has like informed this project.
Awesome. So I wonder now if you could share with us a person, practice, or experience that has supported your queer spirit to flourish.
I think I would have to say it's been the practice of art and creating in general. I think that's kept me alive even since when I was a little kid, even before things were working out for me and like my art was not selling. Like it was my confidant, my friend. It was my safe space. It still is my safe space. It's the one place where I could kind of like, I get what they call the flow, and like you literally just lose time. It's just like, I think that's being able to live out that fantasy in the art world has had immense, I think, effects on me, because it's made me now, I live this outward life that it's also like reflective of my work. And I didn't live that before. And I think that what's helped that and what's helped build up that confidence has been art for me, and being an artist and being just living creatively, I think, in general.
Yeah, yeah. And quickly before we end, since you're talking about your art, I have to say, I love the videos that you post of like you actually making your collages, because they're really cool to watch, but it's also really amazing to know that you're still doing it all with paper and by hand. You're not using the computer. I mean, you might be doing some computer stuff after, but I can see that a lot of people might be doing this kind of stuff on the computer these days. And so it's really cool that you're still doing it all the old fashioned way.
Yeah, I'm a masochist, I guess. I post a lot of those videos because a lot of times people didn't know how I made my work. And I think I still do digital stuff, especially for like my art, like my clients, because if it's a commission, it's different. But if it's something like I do art direction for clients as well, too, that like they commission me to do collages for like campaigns and things like that. That requires some changes sometimes. So basically I have to like cut them out and then scan them and then like reconfigure it on digitally. Because I still, even if it's digital, I still want like it to feel tangible. Because to me, that's like, I obsess over that. That's why I love, like, I can't wait to do another show, because I love showing. It's also like seeing it in person. Like you get to see all of the different textures and layers. Sometimes there are fingerprints on things. Like it adds like this kind of like real feel to it.
Yeah, yeah. And for people listening who might be interested in wanting to make their own collage art but don't want to do the cutouts, you also have collage packs, digital collage packs that people can download all the different pieces and make their own stuff. So people can check that out.
Yeah, and I'm excited to see what you come up with. Like, I end up throwing away a lot of that stuff, and I was like, I think people might be able to get some use out of it.
Yeah, I got the collage pack, and I've been playing with it, and as soon as I have something that I like, I'll throw it up on the gram for you. So, yeah.
Yeah, no, I want to share people's work. It's like quite a few people got it, so I want to see, like, I'm just excited to see it. Like, it's like to see your stuff through someone else's lens. I think it's like interesting. So I'm just excited to see what y'all come up with.
So Kendrick, where can people connect with you and buy the tarot deck or buy the collage pack? Can you share with us how we can find you?
So my personal art is, you can find it at Kendrick, KendrickDaye.com, and on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, and Facebook. Even though I just share it to Facebook. I don't really use it. It's Kendrick Daye, KendrickDaye. And on the Black Queer Tarot is blackqueertarot.com. And on Instagram, it's BLK Queer Tarot. And on Twitter, it's Black Queer Tarot. Instagram is being annoying as usual. So yeah, we have to wait a little while longer to get the actual name, but it's BLK Queer Tarot.
Okay, great. And I will have those links in the show notes so people can also find them there too. Well, thank you for being here, and I'm really excited to have your work out in the world and sharing this new vision of a Black Queer Tarot.
Yeah, I'm really excited. I can't wait for you to actually have the deck in hand and be able to play and like do all the spreads and stuff.
Yeah, it should be arriving in the mail any day now.
Yeah. I actually should go check on yours, but I don't remember seeing your name yet. I have to remember what number, because I'm basically going in order, being a diplomat. Yeah. But thank you so much. This is great.
To find the resources we discussed today, find the show notes at thequeerspirit.com. And if you enjoyed the show, remember to subscribe, rate, and review on iTunes. This will help us reach and support more queer people all over. Thanks for listening, and see you next time.